Good morning, Lansing Journal readers. I am Melanie Youngsma, publisher of the Lansing Journal, here this morning with Josh Bootsma, our managing editor.
Good morning, everyone.
We are here for another weekly video. This week's video is not exactly a news roundup in the typical sense, but it's a compilation of things we want to tell you that came up because of news that was published in the past week.
Right. Yeah.
So let's start with parks.
Yeah.
You did a nice roundup of some of the plans that the Lanoak Park District has for Lansing parks. And I noticed when we shared that to our Facebook page, a lot of conversation happened in the comments. And some of those comments revealed that people may not understand how parks are governed in Lansing.
Yeah, the Park District is planning multiple projects in Lansing. Some range in scale from new playhouses at the dog park, which I know you'll be excited about, Melanie, all the way to a new skate park, a concrete molded skate park at Park Plaza. And those are large projects that are going to require funding and significant funding. So it's important to distinguish the Lanoak Park District from the Village of Lansing.
Right. Those are two separate governing bodies.
Right. So the Lanoak Park District receives their own tax levy. The Village of Lansing receives its own taxes. So those are two separate entities that your taxes go to. And so they have different priorities. Obviously, the Village of Lansing is using tax dollars for street resurfacing and purchasing, paying their employees and purchasing other things for the village. And the Park District is more focused on improving the parks, right? That's kind of their sole goal.
Right, and people are welcome to share their opinions with the Park District about those projects.
Right.
The Park District has public meetings, just like the Village Board does, and the public is invited and welcome to attend those meetings and hear what's going on. And there's a chance at those meetings to give public comment.
Right, yeah. And it's scheduled a little bit differently than the way the Village Board is.
Right. So things are brought up at Committee of the Whole as discussion items, and then there's 2 weeks to think about it, talk about it, get information, and then it's voted on at the board meeting 2 weeks later.
Right.
But that's different at a park board meeting.
It's different at a park board meeting. The way the park board meetings are scheduled since they resumed in-person meetings is they start with a Committee of the Whole meeting where they determine what's going to be on the agenda for the regular meeting, and then that regular meeting happens immediately afterwards. So things discussed at the Committee of the Whole then go on the regular meeting agenda immediately afterwards. So the park board meets the third Monday of the month at the Eisenhower Center at 6:30, and they start with a Committee of the Whole meeting, and then by the end of the night they have finally voted on those projects that they first discussed.
Right. So that changes our reporting a little bit. When we report on something that happens at a Committee of the Whole meeting for the village, that's an opportunity for the public to read that and then ask their trustees about it, or voice complaints or support or whatever. And then when we report on the vote, that means it's finished and it's done.
Right.
But when we report on a park board meeting, all of that has happened at the same night. So you were reporting that this was voted on and approved, and these plans are going to happen.
Yeah, and these plans are things that are, there are multiple steps to them.
Right.
So as far as going out to bid for certain parts of the project and different details that will be discussed, and there will actually be, dollar amounts given. There really hasn't been too much of that so far. But so there is an opportunity to have input as a community in the business that the park board is doing. It just means you essentially have to go to the meetings.
Right.
So those are on the third Monday of the month. And we've been to a few, Melanie, and there aren't usually too many residents there. No. And I think the park board would appreciate residents showing up and being invested in that public body in Lansing.
That's one reason we publish those agendas.
Right.
The agendas that we publish come out at least 48 hours ahead of the meeting, and we publish those almost as soon as we get them, so that people can put that on their calendars and decide based on what the agenda says whether or not they want to attend.
Right.
And if you read the obituaries, you may have noticed that most of the ones we publish come from Smith's Funeral Homes. So people asked, it's a natural question, people asked why we were publishing more Smiths than Schroeder Lauer.
Right.
So let me clarify things. Smits made a decision to work with the Lansing Journal to publish all of his obituaries from his Dyer location and his South Helen location, and anyone for whom Lansing is mentioned in the obituary.
Right.
So he made that decision ahead of time, and that way he doesn't have to ask each family if they want to be in the Lansing Journal. He just offers that as a service to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we keep track of how many Smith's obituaries we are publishing, and then we invoice him at the end of the month for the obituaries. And we charge $50 an obituary. That's a service that families then don't have to think about. It's a decision they don't have to make during that time of crisis. Tim Smith has already made that decision, and it's easy for us. We know when we see those obituaries to go ahead and format them and get them ready for publication. Schroeder Lauer, on the other hand, takes a different approach. They ask each family, do you want to be in the Lansing Journal? And if a family says yes, then they notify us, and we go ahead and publish it.
Yeah.
And then we bill them one at a time. So just two different approaches to obituaries, but that is the reason that you see a lot more Smith's obituaries than Schroeder Lauer obituaries.
Yeah. There are some, like traditional print journalism would charge different rates for the amount of words that you're going to put.
Right.
We don't. Our fee is a flat fee for the obituary. So we will publish as many words as are in the obituary. We're not going to trim anything.
And photos.
That's right. And photos as well.
Yeah, I remember Schroeder Lauer telling me that was a big headache for families who were trying to make a decision about which publications they wanted to be in. And like the Times and the Tribune charge by line or by word. And so then you want to get the details. Usually it was a death announcement. People wanted to know when the funeral was going to be and where the funeral was going to be. And so you wanted to get that important information in there, but a lot of the life story got left out because it was so expensive to include that line by line. We will publish the whole obituary and as many photos as you want, all for $50.
Right.
And we occasionally get obituary requests directly from a family.
Right.
Or from a funeral home out of state, from somebody who used to live in Lansing. And then we charge the families or those other funeral homes directly just the $50.
Yeah.
And we like to include obituaries because we know that's important community news.
Right.
People like to know what has happened to people. A lot of these people have lived in the community for a long time and have been involved in schools and churches, and so that's important community news that we like to provide.
Right. We just want to touch on a few other good news things that we heard of this week. One was Melanie got to put her reporter hat on again this week for a little while and report on COVID positivity rates at TF South. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I got the information sort of secondhand, and then I was able to call Jake Gorley, and he was very gracious. I know things are busy over at the high school.
Jake Gorley, who's the principal
right,
at TF South.
TF South principal. Yeah. And he was gracious enough to give me some time and explain what this positivity rate means. And as you'll read in the story, TF South is now offering COVID testing to students every Monday. And at the time that the story was written, about 300 students had been tested and only 3 tested positive. So their positivity rate was like 1%. And I think Lansing's in general positivity rate was 4.5%, something like that. So Jake made the comment that you're safer at TF South than at the local grocery store. So just a good example of how all the extra measures that they've put in place at TF South are having a positive effect on the positivity rate.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a really good follow-up to a lot of the conversations people were having over the summer. First, what does this second school year in the pandemic look like? Can we go back in person? Is it safe? And I think, like you said, TF South has taken measures to make it safe for their students. Another piece of good news that I heard about this week was an email conversation that I had with Elizabeth Avila, who you might remember is the mom of Super Tessie. The good news is that the family needed to raise $2,000 ahead of their trip to Arizona in a few weeks, and they did that. Elizabeth told me in large part to our reporting and the help that our readers were able to give. So between the raffles that they held on Facebook and the different garage sales that they had on multiple weekends this summer, they were able to raise enough money, and we're happy to say that Super Tessie is going to Arizona for her next stem cell transplant.
I'm sure the family is grateful for the finances, of course, but I think showing up at a garage sale or buying a raffle ticket also lets them know that they are not alone, that they are part of a community.
That's right.
So thank you for doing that, Lansing.
Elizabeth told me in her email, and she said it truly does take a village. So thank you, Lansing, for your involvement, and everyone else. I think that covers us for this Friday. It is Columbus and Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, so if you have a day off, enjoy your long weekend, and we'll be back next week.
Right.